On a cold February night in 1958, somewhere above the coast of Georgia, the United States Air Force made a decision that still haunts American military history. A live thermonuclear bomb was dropped into the darkness below, and it was never found. If you enjoy forgotten American history, subscribe and join us for more videos like this. To understand how a nuclear weapon ends up at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, you first need to understand the world that made such a thing possible. The late 1950s were defined by one overwhelming, suffocating fear. The fear that nuclear war was not only possible, but inevitable. The United States and the Soviet Union had spent more than a decade locked in an arms race of almost incomprehensible scale. Both nations stockpiled warheads. Both nations tested bombs. Both nations pointed weapons at each other across an ocean and dared the other to blink first. In America, the responsibility of nuclear deterrence fell largely to an organization called Strategic Air Command, the SAC. Its motto was simple and chilling. Peace is our profession. But the peace they maintained rested entirely on the threat of total annihilation. SAC operated fleets of nuclear-capable bombers around the clock, keeping aircraft in the air at all hours, loaded with live weapons, ready to respond to a Soviet attack within minutes. The logic was brutal but clear. If the Soviets knew that American bombers were always airborne, always armed, always ready, they would never dare strike first. This meant that on any given night during the 1950s, American bombers carrying hydrogen bombs were flying over American cities, American coastlines, and American waters. It was considered a necessary risk. The alternative, an undefended nation caught off guard, was considered far worse. One of the workhorses of this strategy was the B-47 Stratojet. Fast, sleek, and capable of reaching the stratosphere, the B-47 was the backbone of America's airborne nuclear deterrent. It was a marvel of its era. It was also, like all machines, fallible. On the night of February 5, 1958, Major Howard Richardson and his crew boarded their B-47 Stratojet for what was supposed to be a routine training mission over the southeastern United States. The aircraft was armed. It carried a Mark 15 thermonuclear bomb, one of the most powerful weapons in the American arsenal at the time. Training missions with live weapons were not unusual. That was the doctrine of the era. You trained the way you fought, and you flew with what you carried. The mission took the aircraft over the coast of Georgia, near the city of Savannah. It was nighttime. Visibility was limited, and somewhere in that dark sky, another aircraft was doing its own job, an F-86 Sabre fighter jet conducting an interception exercise. In the language of military aviation, an interception exercise is exactly what it sounds like. A fighter attempts to locate, approach, and simulate an attack on a bomber. It tests the readiness of both the bomber crew and the fighter pilot. On this night, the exercise went catastrophically wrong. The F-86, executing its maneuver in the darkness, misjudged its approach. It struck the B-47. The collision was sudden, violent, and nearly fatal. The fighter tore into the bomber's fuselage, shearing metal, rupturing fuel lines. The F-86 itself was so severely damaged that its pilot was forced to eject. He survived. But the B-47, carrying Major Richardson and his crew, was left crippled at altitude, leaking fuel, struggling for stability, and still carrying a live hydrogen bomb beneath its wings. In the cockpit, the crew assessed the damage. The situation was serious. The aircraft was flyable, but barely. And now came the question that no pilot ever wants to face. What do you do with the weapon? The Mark 15 thermonuclear bomb that hung beneath the B-47 was not a small device. It weighed nearly 8,000 pounds. It was one of America's early-staged hydrogen bombs, designed to deliver a yield far beyond anything dropped in World War II. In the right, or rather the wrong, circumstances, it was capable of leveling a city. Major Richardson and his crew faced a grim calculation. The aircraft was damaged. Landing a damaged aircraft is always dangerous. Landing a damaged aircraft carrying a live nuclear bomb introduces a level of risk that borders on the unthinkable. If something went wrong during approach, if the landing gear failed, if the aircraft broke apart on the runway, if there was fire, the results could be catastrophic, not just for the crew, but for the city of Savannah and everyone in it. Richardson contacted his superiors. The situation was explained. The options were weighed, and the decision was made. The bomb had to go. Under the authority granted to him and approved by the chain of command, Richardson was ordered to jettison the weapon. He would drop it into the water off the coast of Georgia in an area that appeared sparsely populated and relatively shallow, a body of water near Tybee Island, just outside Savannah. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, the bomb bay doors of the damaged B-47 opened over the dark Atlantic coastline. The Mark 15 thermonuclear bomb fell away from the aircraft and disappeared into the night. There was no explosion. The weapon was not armed for detonation in the conventional sense. It would not detonate simply from impact with water. Richardson and his crew turned back toward land and managed to bring the stricken bomber down safely. They had survived. The bomb, however, was gone. The United States military does not lose nuclear weapons without attempting to find them. Within hours of the jettison, recovery operations were underway. The Air Force and Navy mobilized resources, divers, sonar equipment, boats, radiation detection gear, and began scouring the waters near Tybee Island and Wassaw Sound, the shallow inlet where the bomb was believed to have entered the water. The search was hampered from the start. The coastline around Savannah is not clean, open ocean. It is a complex geography of tidal rivers, marshlands, shifting sandbars, and deep mud flats. Visibility underwater was poor. The mud on the seafloor was thick and soft, the kind of sediment that swallows objects completely, sealing them beneath the surface as though they had never existed. Search teams probed, scanned, and dove for weeks. They found nothing. Military planners had assumed the recovery would be swift. Days, perhaps. A week at most. But the days stretched into weeks, and the weeks eventually led to a conclusion that no one wanted to officially accept. The bomb could not be found. The search was called off. In the formal language of the military, the incident was classified as a loss. In the informal language of the people who understood what that meant, an American hydrogen bomb was sitting somewhere on the bottom of a Georgia tidal flat, and no one knew exactly where. For decades, the question that haunted this story was not simply where the bomb was, but what the bomb was. Specifically, did it contain its nuclear core? Was it, in any meaningful sense, a live weapon? Or was it, as some officials suggested, a training configuration, a weapon casing without the plutonium necessary to produce a nuclear yield? The government's position shifted over the years in ways that did little to inspire confidence. Early statements suggested the weapon posed no significant danger. Later declassified documents painted a more complicated picture. Some records indicated that the Mark 15 carried aboard Richardson's B-47 that night was a complete weapon, fully assembled, containing its nuclear and thermonuclear components. Other records were ambiguous, incomplete, or contradictory. The full truth, if it existed anywhere in a single coherent document, was not made easily available to the public. Private researchers and investigative journalists who took up the question over the following decades encountered a wall of official uncertainty. Radiation surveys conducted near Tybee Island by independent investigators claimed to show elevated readings in certain areas of Wassaw Sound. The military disputed the methodology. The debate continued. What became clear over time was that the United States government had formally decided, whether for practical, financial, or political reasons, that the cost of a renewed recovery effort outweighed the perceived risk of leaving the weapon where it was. In a 2001 Air Force report, officials assessed the risk of the bomb causing a nuclear explosion as essentially zero, but acknowledged that its conventional explosives could still potentially detonate under the right conditions. That finding brought cold comfort to those living nearby. The Tybee Island bomb is not the only nuclear weapon the United States has ever lost. The military has a term for accidents involving nuclear weapons: broken arrow. Between 1950 and 1980, there were dozens of broken arrow incidents. Weapons lost in crashes, dropped from aircraft, involved in fires, or simply misplaced during transport. A B-52 broke apart over Palomares, Spain in 1966, scattering 4 hydrogen bombs across farmland. Another B-52 crashed in Greenland in 1968, contaminating miles of ice with radioactive material. In 1961, a bomber broke apart over North Carolina, and 2 nuclear weapons fell to Earth, one of which deployed its parachute and came within a single safety switch of detonating over American soil. These are not rumors. They are documented history. They are the hidden cost of building a nuclear deterrent so vast and so ever-present that the weapons themselves became as much a danger as the enemies they were meant to deter. The Cold War created a world in which nuclear weapons were not only pointed at foreign adversaries, they were floating in American harbors, buried in American fields, and resting on the floors of American coastal waters. For the residents of Tybee Island and Savannah, the knowledge that a hydrogen bomb may rest within miles of their shores has been a quiet, persistent presence in their lives for more than 6 decades. Most days, people swim in those waters. Families walk the beaches. Fishing boats move through Wausau Sound. Life continues in the shadow of a secret that was never quite kept and never quite resolved. The story of the Tybee Island bomb is, at its heart, a story about the gap between the confidence with which powerful institutions make dangerous decisions and the reality of what happens when those decisions go wrong. A weapon was built. It was carried into the sky as a matter of routine. An accident occurred. A decision was made in the dark over open water under enormous pressure. And then the weapon was gone, swallowed by the mud and the tide, and the people responsible moved on. The Cold War has ended. The Soviet Union that justified all of those airborne nuclear patrols no longer exists, but the bomb remains. If it is still there, if it has not shifted or corroded or been buried beyond any hope of detection, somewhere in the silt beneath the coastal waters of Georgia, history may still be waiting quietly in the dark. Not ticking, perhaps. Not dangerous in any immediate measurable sense, but present. A reminder that the decisions made by governments and militaries in moments of crisis do not always end when the crisis passes. Sometimes they simply sink beneath the surface, beneath the years, and endure long after the world that created them has moved on. The lost bomb of Tybee Island has never been recovered. As of today, it has not been found.